Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. And yeah, so I did mention that I was about to go mess with my GTX 280 a bit, and I did. And now I'm gonna go over how well that went. And if you ask me, I think it went pretty well, considering that there's no mods on this. Like, yeah, I'm putting on a custom cooling solution because the stock heatsink kinda sucks, and it is very modding unfriendly, especially on a card like this, which has like one GPU and then another display drive chip, which you also have to cool. Yeah, it's kinda annoying to deal with, but I did figure something out. I did trash the stock heatsink in the process. So yeah, this is going on water or nothing else. Or like, I guess it's gonna fit like a custom heat. Well, actually, the thing is, the mounting holes right here are like very slightly more spaced out than on like a GTX 400 to 900 series card. Just a little bit. Like, you can't really see the difference, but it's there just enough so that you can't mount a heatsink to that with standard NVIDIA mounting spacing. So that's kind of annoying. Yeah. But my freeze mod block does still fit this, because like it's like, yeah. Can I show this without radiator falling down again? You can kind of see it, like there's a lot of different sizes supported, and the GTX 280 is one of them. And yeah, so first I ran this thing just with the reference heatsink to see what it can kind of do. Well, I did actually get onto the thing is with GTX 280s, they don't do Firestrike, they don't do 3D Mark 11, they don't do superposition. So for HW board, of the benchmarks that I run, or like more like have, this thing does Vantage and it does Heaven. Heaven needs a very heavily optimized operating system, which I don't know how to do. That leaves me basically with Vantage. And I know that there's like Aquamark and like older 3D marks also. I'm gonna eventually run those, but I'm gonna be using Vantage mainly on this. Because like it's the most recent, and of the benchmarks that this card does, it's the one that I know the most. Yeah. So, and the thing is, on HW board, the Vantage ranking for the GTX 280 is insanely competitive. Like, I think there's only one guy on the first page, so places 1 to 20, who's not running sub-ambient. I didn't actually check, like it says water cooling, but sometimes they put in water cooling and then run chilled water anyway. But I think that was regular water cooling, so only one guy made it on the first page. And then on the second page there's also another couple of people who run like Dry Ice or LN2. Like, there's a lot of people really pushing these cards in the Vantage ranking. And considering all that, I think I did get kinda far. So with the stock heatsink, this did like a 16.4K Vantage performance, which I think is on the second page, somewhere in the lower region, like places, like 30 to 40. And then when I ran this on water, so I deleted the core, I got a little VRAM heatsink and used some thermotape to put it on this little, what I think is the display drive chip. And then off the stock heatsink I was able to like Dremel this off. And now I have VRM cooling. The thing is, one thing that I'm quite happy about that worked out on this is this card came with some absolutely disgusting thermal pads. Like, I threw them away. Well, actually, no, I still have the base plate. That still has some of them on them. Yeah, so it came with these kinds of thermal pads, like these cloth kind of thingies. And these are the ones that look the best on the card. The front VRAM chips, this little chip, and the VRM. They all had these pads on them, but much smaller and in much worse state. Like, you can kind of see how this is falling apart. that's basically the best state you could find, the ones on the front end. So I didn't want to reuse the VRM thermal pads because they basically disintegrated completely when I removed the cooling plate. I do have some thermal pads, though not that small to fit on the VRM on this card. And I do want to kind of keep them in a bigger state because maybe I get a card that needs like VRM cooling or VRM cooling really badly, and if it's like chopped up in little pieces, that might not fit anymore. So what I did here is actually use thermal paste. I don't know if you can... Oh, I just realized this is recording 1080p 60 FPS, not 4K 30. Oops. Enjoy 60 FPS, I guess, but the resolution's gonna be kinda low on this one. Yeah, it doesn't want to really focus. But like under there, I've actually used thermal paste. I screwed it down as much as I could, and actually the temperatures were better than stock. So it does work. It's just gonna be a mess once I decide to remove it, which is why I'm not doing that right now. But yeah. As far as the VRM goes, this is basically the main part why I want to like... Well, I've messaged one guy on eBay, haven't gotten a response yet, but basically there's like 1 or 2 GTX 280s on eBay I would like to pick up. And then I'm gonna bin them, and if they do worse than this, I'm gonna e-power that one. If they do better than this, I'm gonna e-power this one. Because I do want to e-power a GTX 280. Because, like, yeah, if there's a HW board, like, I've been told there's gonna be an HW board competition with GTX 280s, which means that insanely competitive Vantage ranking is gonna get even more competitive. And considering that there's no custom GTX 280 cards, at least none that I could find, I really do want to turn up with an e-power. Like I don't even know how good the reference VRM on this is. So this is it has a 5-phase V-core, and it's in this like really weird layout, which is why I absolutely had to keep that part of the stock heatsink, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to cool this. So you can see it has like this zigzag line. And this phase is actually not part of core, because this is using a different... Well, I don't know. Are they power stages? I think they're called smart slaves, because this card uses a Volterra chip, like a Volterra made VRM. And basically what Volterra is doing like is very different from what most other VRM component manufacturers do. Because Volterra kind of has like... Well, it's kind of hard to explain because I also don't really remember it fully. But like usually you have a PWM controller sending a PWM signal to like every phase it's driving. Whereas on Volterra I think there's just one signal going to the first smart slave, and that sends then a signal along to the second and to the third and so on. And like the control scheme is basically completely different from what you usually have. And these are also like only one chip, so basically like a power stage, but also a really funky looking power stage, which I wish I could show that to you, but since there's thermal paste on there, really don't want to. But basically it's like a little GPU die, because there's like usually MOSFETs and power stages are like plastic packaging, and sometimes like you get some that have like a metal package or like some exposed pad for better thermal transfer. No, these ones are literally just silicon chips, like the GPU or this little display drive chip. Like they're shiny. Looks pretty cool. But like I don't know how powerful this is, and considering that Nvidia reference cards in the past have been pretty much... Yeah, you can overclock this slightly, but if you push it more, it will blow up. Not could, it will. So yeah. And also another thing is like, there's another phase over here with a different, like, okay, there's like 2 kinds of smart slave they use it. There's like the smaller kind, like a slightly smaller kind, which they use for the 5 V-core phases. And then there's a slightly bigger kind, which they use for this phase, and then this upper phase. I guess one of them is memory. They could both be memory. I haven't measured them actually. I think they could be powering this, But also there's some VRM components over here, there's an LDO over here, so maybe, like, this wasn't getting really, like, this was staying very, very cool, so this doesn't really draw a lot of power. So it could totally be that it's, like, powered by this thing. Which, like, the GTX 285, which is essentially the same card, but, like, slightly higher end, which, like, if came out later, is, like, using a 6+2 phase VRM, using some very normal MOSFETs, like, not like this one. So maybe this is just two memory phases, kinda in a weird layout. Like, I mean, look at the back of this. Like, you see all those different power planes? Like, this thing has a weird ass layout. So, yeah. But I do want to e-power a GTX 280. And yeah, that's basically it. And yeah, so in terms of overclocking, when I deleted this thing and ran it on water, basically what I was able to reach was 840 MHz core at 1.35 volts. That's set in software. I didn't measure how much actually goes into the core, but I would think it's gonna be like 1.3 to like 1.27. Or maybe that's Dyson's. Maybe there actually is going 1.35 into it. Don't know. Have to measure. Yeah, so 840 MHz core, or more like 837. Like I said 840, but it applied 837. 1320 MHz memory. And then also 1674 MHz shader. So that's a thing not really unique to this card, but it is slightly different. So on Fermi, like GTX 400 and 500 cards, you had a GPU Z reading for like shader clock, and it was always double of your core clock. You couldn't really do anything with that, couldn't really adjust it, not that I know, but like it was there. On this card, you can adjust the shader clock. And yeah, so it like, the thing is, your core clock can never be higher than half your shader clock. And that's a bit annoying, because on my card, my shader clock is actually limiting my core clock. So I can't bring up my shader clock more because it will crash, but I could theoretically bring up my core because while clocking the card up, I never ran into a spot where like, oh, the core can't do more. It was always the shader clock that got me instability. And I did see in the ranking, there were a couple people running way higher shader clock than core, so like it wasn't one half. They could have gone higher on core, so I assume they got core instability while I'm just being limited by shader clock, which is kinda annoying. Also because shader clock only steps in like really big steps. So I'm at 1674, I think the next step is 1728 MHz. And that just isn't stable. Like, I mean, it runs like heaven for a couple minutes, but it can't get through Vantage, because Vantage is long and pretty heavy. So yeah. So that's basically where I am. 1320 MHz on the memory is kinda low compared to the ranking. There's a bunch of people running 1350 or even 1400, but I think the 1400 MHz people were like having their card sub-ambient. So my memory doesn't seem to be that great. However, my core seems to be pretty solid. Considering that well, actually, what did I get? My final score was like a 16,964, I think. So almost 17,000. Which should be around 30th place. So about, yeah, so essentially 10 people who are at ambient still ahead of me, and I haven't even modded this thing. So pretty decent. I haven't uploaded the score yet because, well, I didn't really feel like it. I think I can get their better scores pretty easily. I was told you can unlock more voltage than 1.35 volts on this in software. I just don't know how. I'm gonna have to ask again. I do know you can also just volt mob this. However, this might be a bit different with this Volterra controller. But there is a way to volt mob this physically and in software, I've been told. So more voltage we will get. And then I think, like, for cap modding, this is actually not that bad. Like, I assume pretty much all of these are VRM output filtering, which means stacking more multilayer ceramics on top of these and then stacking can types on top of those multilayer ceramics is gonna be really, really easy. The core is also not super cluttered, so you could theoretically stack some multilayer ceramics on these 6 bigger ones. The memory also has a fair amount of capacitors around it, also on the front. Also, this is a really big memory bus. Like, this is a 512 memory, 512-bit memory bus. So this has 16 memory chips. If you're wondering, by the way, these are 0.5 gigabit, so they store 64 megabytes. GDDR3, and the specific chip is Hynix CFR. So, I know that's... Wait, are all of those? They're all upside down. Yeah, so it's CFR GDDR3. First time working with GDDR3. I actually don't know if that 1320 MHz is effective clock or if it is actual DRAM clock. Because if it's actual DRAM clock, this is actually kind of fast. Because like GDDR5 on Fermi does like 1250. This does 1320, and apparently 1320 is kind of slow. So yeah, like this, yeah, like for NVIDIA, this is the latest generation using GDDR3, so I assume these would be getting kind of fast. Like, I'm not sure, this might just be, it's probably effective clock, not actual DRAM clock. But yeah. What else is there to say about this? Power, this thing doesn't really draw any. So, when I ran the card at like full tilt and vantage, I did check my kilowatt meter, which is measuring power consumption of the entire test bench, so that's including power supply losses, CPU, motherboard RGB, pumps, fans, like all that, and it was at around like basically just around 320 watts. So, considering I have an 8700K at 5.1 GHz, which is very not energy efficient. Admittedly, it probably wasn't doing much in that test, but like, I think you can subtract like 70 watts for the rest of the system. Yeah, this thing at 1.35 volts wasn't really drawing any current, or like any power. And it was... Yeah, for temperatures, I think it was at like 33 degrees, which isn't the best temperature. I did get a 580 colder at some point, but I think that was cold ambient. So, yeah, it doesn't seem to be drawing that much power, actually. Which, well, is probably good, because less power means it's gonna be less temperature dependent. So there's... Yeah, so like... You have to throw less cooling at the problem, and you can get potentially better gains by just modding the card. Which means this could be very, very fun. Like, there would be a lot of things to mod on here. So yeah. So, this card is very interesting. Very, very slow. Like the thing is, you could still play games with the GTX 480 if you wanted to. It is possible. You can actually get more than 60 FPS at 1080p in, well, not AAA games, but like, like GTA 5 runs just fine on Fermi. On this thing, yeah, I think you practically couldn't use this for anything. Like, it has 240 cores. That's less than a 460. Like, and that, oh my, I mean, okay, yeah, later there was the 285 and then at some point a dual GPU card, but like, this was pretty much the Tesla flagship, and it's slower than a Fermi mid-range card. Like, that was back in the day where like the next generation would turn your top-end build into literal garbage. So yeah, this is like overclocking only, which is probably why they are so cheap. Like, Fermi cards, if you want a working one, right now in this market, you will probably end up paying like 50 euros for one, which is insane if you ask me. For this one, well, I got this one together with 2 other cards, but if you would look for GTX 1080 right now, you can find them from like basically around 20 euros in like working state. I think for 20 euros, considering how slow they are, it's probably not good value, but like 20 euros is pretty close to the like practical minimum like of price that a graphics card on eBay can be, because like if someone would make like a €1 of profit on it, they wouldn't bother selling it, they would just throw it in the garbage. So 20 euros is pretty close to the like practical minimum you can pay for a like graphics card that works just fine. So yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, for beginners, like if you're a beginner at overclocking, my previous suggestion was just get a Fermi card. It probably still is just get a Fermi card, because Fermi still runs pretty much everything. Fermi still like it does Firestrike. It does like modern things. This doesn't. Like this does DirectX 9 and DirectX 10. It doesn't do 11 or 12. I think Fermi also doesn't do 12, but I think it can do the like emulation thing where it still can kind of run DirectX 12 things, but not really. Yeah, but this is DirectX 10 and nothing more. So like this, it also got its drivers discontinued years ago. Like I think the newest version you can get on this is like 341 something. Yeah, that's like an ancient driver version. Yeah. So, but I mean they do run Vantage. Vantage is fairly popular. They don't pull a lot of power, which means you don't really need a very powerful cooler, which you do need on Fermi to really push them. They do have a decent voltage range already unlocked by default, so like up to 1.35 volts. And yeah, like you can practice modding on these. And yeah, I mean, yeah, these would be a good candidate for like beginners to test. It's just that like basically I just like Firestrike, and this doesn't do Firestrike. So yeah. Yeah, that's basically the thing. Also, Fermi has custom cards. Because like reference cards for Fermi, like, yeah, you have to e-power them. I don't know for 280s. For now, the VRM thermals are actually very, very great. It was at like 35 to 40 degrees. So, been doing very fine. But I don't know at what point I'm just gonna draw too much current for the VRM to handle. But yeah, like 280s, I don't know, maybe like sometimes there are some like weird custom cards that you can only find in Asia. Maybe there's something like that. But in Europe and also US, as far as I know, pretty much only reference cards are available for GTX 280. Which, I mean, yeah, everyone has the same thing, so you can just copy everyone's mods, which is kind of convenient. But the thing is, custom cards exist for a reason, because NVIDIA reference is usually very, very bad for overclocking. So, yeah, you might run into, like, a point where, like, yeah, you would just have to e-power it at that point, which is not very beginner friendly. And you can get Fermi cards that don't have this problem. But yeah, I mean, these are cheaper than Fermi right now, and you can still do like the basic things with like volt modding and cap modding them. So yeah, I guess they're somewhat beginner friendly, but I still do prefer Fermi over this. But I think enough said at this point. We are at 25 minutes. I really managed to waste 25 minutes in a video where I basically just say, hey, I ran at 280, I got these clocks, and I'm this far in the ranking. Well, anyway. So, thank you all for watching, if you're still here. And until next time, goodbye.